Hello and welcome to the first annual Follow Money, Fight Slavery Summit. I'm Sam Graber, Chief Communications Officer for the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative, also known as Team ATII. ATII helps financial institutions promote their corporate social responsibility through increasing awareness, facilitating intelligence integration and technology advancement, all while establishing strategic data collaboration, each of which are focused on one outcome: to combat human trafficking. Now, throughout the virtual summit, you will hear industry leaders discussing the importance of really why now, more than ever, it's time for financial institutions to take action against human trafficking, because human trafficking is a financial crime, and this is an industry call to action. So as you listen and you find yourself wanting to dive deeper, please, by all means, visit us at followmoneyfightslavery.org. You'll find free resources there that you can put into play immediately. And while you're there, you can take our quiz to see where you can amp up your corporate social responsibility impact when it comes to combating trafficking of our fellow humans. With me today, I am thrilled to bring to you Scott Apodaca from Western Union and Rich Lebel from TRAC, which is the Transaction Record Analysis Center. And this session is called How to Leverage Partnerships to Fight Human Trafficking. And let me tell you, folks, these gentlemen are top tier leaders. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for being with me today.
Good morning and thank you. I appreciate you having me, Sam.
Yeah.
Good morning, Scott.
Rich, nice to see you again, and yes, looking forward to it and appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. I love it. So Scott, if you would please start us out, I would love for you to give us an overview of what your organization is doing to follow money, fight slavery.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. First and foremost, where we start is in our Western Union efforts to combat human trafficking are really central to our core mission to move money for better. And like all of us here who work day to day to combat this issue, we obviously vigorously condemn any type of activity related to human trafficking, and have really come a long way to utilize kind of powerful and innovative technology along with human collaboration to kind of lead to the identification and capture of criminals, right? We do this through the design of a global human trafficking initiative or anti-human trafficking initiative. And really this is built on three main principles. The first principle is centered on what we call partnerships and information exchange. So a lot built on what we're going to talk about today is what we try to do. And what this means is we look to identify organizations, whether that be law enforcement, whether that be NGOs, whether that be other financial institutions, to partner with. And those partnerships can take a lot of different form. And through that partnership, we find creative ways to share information to enhance our understanding collectively to combat the issue. So that's the first one. The second one, we try to leverage that information that we gather to support what we call education and awareness. So looking to educate not only Western Union employees and those locations that offer our services, but the communities that we serve and the industry that we work in. Spreading awareness to the issue is often the first hurdle that needs to be overcome. And so by focusing efforts on education and awareness, we can identify opportunities in the places that we are potentially vulnerable, and also find opportunities for new partnerships. And then the third piece, which I think we'll get into today, is also what we call risk identification and mitigation. So this is the financial intelligence work. This is using the data, finding the bad people. And ultimately, the driver there is to identify, detect, and report, right? So we want to identify bad actors in the financial system and report on them through appropriate channels to law enforcement to share insights into what we're seeing. Those three pieces are centered on a global effort for Western Union. So as a global organization, we have global responsibility. And so we work each one of those principles with the right partners in all aspects all over the world. And so finding unique space to collaborate really has been key to us. And I think centered to what we'll talk about today, getting insights from Rich and the work his team has done and the coordination with law enforcement is a huge part of that. But there are also items that we'll probably talk about that are not centered on law enforcement, but other ways that we can collaborate with NGOs and share information and to enhance everybody's understanding, enhance our collective capabilities to end trafficking.
I love it. And I apologize, I didn't say name what your title is. Would you please share with us what your title is with Western
Oh,
Union?
I apologize. Yes, I am a director of the
Okay.
Financial Intelligence Unit and head of Western Union's Anti-Human Trafficking Initiative.
Awesome. And that was all on me. I should have said that in the first place. All right. So, Rich, I would love it if you would introduce yourself and your position there at TRAC, and then give an idea, number one, what TRAC is, and then kind of piggyback off what Scott was sharing as far as what you all are up to.
Sure. So I am currently the executive director of TRAC, and to give you the Reader's Digest version of what TRAC does, because there's still a lot of law enforcement around the country that doesn't know that we exist, and I'm sure there's several in the financial industry. So we have a couple of different functions. Number one, we provide training to law enforcement and to the lesser degree the financial industry on anti-money laundering practices and just kind of what's going on currently in the world in terms of the movement of money. But really the bread and butter of what TRAC is we are a repository. Essentially, we manage transactional data for money service businesses, more than 24 of them right now. So it's a database that contains MSB transactions that are obtained through legal process and which are made available to law enforcement only. The hope is that law enforcement takes that data that's made available, and it really helps them bolster the ground truth that they're seeing out there with their investigations. Let's face it, human trafficking, just like just about every other criminal activity out there, the purpose of it is to make money and to profit. And that's what our database is all about, is financial transactions. So we're always really trying to push law enforcement to hop into our database and see how they can use that information to assist them with their investigations.
Sure. That's awesome. Thank you for that. It really helps because, yeah, you're right. There are so many good things going on in the field, but if we don't all know about them, we can't be collectively adding to it and drawing from that information and then sharing back and forth. And that's a lot of what we wanted to have you guys here together today for, is to talk about information sharing, the bigger picture, how this kind of all comes together. So we talked ahead of time just to let you all know. So we've planned this session so that we can really provide as much of an impact for you and also help you know that there are resources out there for you that prior to today you might not have been aware of. If you have any questions or want to follow up on anything, there is a chat to the side. If you're joining us live, you can ask in some questions and we'll be sure to get those to these gentlemen. This is a pre-recorded session, but they may be able to hop in at some point during the summit and be able to answer that. If not, you are always welcome to email us at info@followmoneyfightslavery.org, and we will follow up with you directly from there. So just if you're sitting there, you got a burning question, by all means, fire off an email and I will make sure that gets to the right people. Because again, our goal is to inform you. So Scott, we had talked about like how an organization can determine its own tolerance of risk and its collaboration bandwidth. So I thought we'd start with that. If you would kind of kick us off, and then Rich, just kind of add in, and I'm just here to facilitate the conversation and answer any questions about how ATII fits into the exchange of information as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam.
Cool. Thank you.
So the first thing I would say is, it's important for every financial institution to understand that they are a potential target, right, for those who wish to channel funds for human trafficking. Whether or not you have identified it in the past, whether or not you believe it's happening with your customer base, odds are it is. And so first coming to that reality is often the first step. Sure. It doesn't mean that you are not aware or your program's not sound, but I think, do you understand the human trafficking risk for your organization? That's the first thing. So if you talk about kind of the idea of understanding your environment, what are your threats? How well do you know your customers? How well do you know the issue of trafficking? And how well do you understand your vulnerabilities that exist within your existing institution? You have to start at a 50,000-foot view and finding ways, either through the individuals in your organization or through collaboration, partnerships, open source information to inform yourself. So that's the first thing I always say. No matter the size of the organization, before you get to your risk tolerance, you have to understand your risk environment and what threats do you face so you can cater your program specifically to address those threats. I think, the second thing I would talk about is, understanding that collaboration is absolutely a key. If you go it alone, I believe many organizations will not be as successful. And so what does that mean? It means, having real discussions with leadership in your organization about the appetite you want to have when engaging with law enforcement, when exchanging information here, and I know we'll talk about it maybe a little later, around through channels like 314B, right? Are you doing the bare minimum, or are you forward leaning in the area? That's an institutional cultural decision that each organization has to make, but it's a key aspect that sets the foundation for what your organizations are willing and able to do. And the third thing I like to talk about is understand perfection is not the goal. So I really tell people when they ask me about, well, how do I start the program? It's progress over perfection. It's evolution of your program, and to feel that you need to I guess completely remove human trafficking, any transaction, any piece from your organization is probably an unrealistic expectation to start with, but slowly building with short-term wins, identifying key resources in your organization, identifying partnerships that you can touch base with, in your areas. That's the first place to start. So those three things have often been key for us. And then I would say, once you've done that, again, easier said than done, you have to continually re-examine those threats, re-examine your outreach approach, re-examine kind of the progress. It's not a set it and forget it kind of program. As Rich will probably speak to in a test, criminals continue to evolve. They understand what we are doing from a financial institution perspective to identify, to block, to mitigate this activity. And so looking on a routine basis at your program and what you're doing can really be a good observation for you to have looking at the macro level view. And then the last thing I'll say before turning it over to Rich, as far as collaboration, don't be afraid to say no to certain interactions. I know this is kind of a counterintuitive message, but you don't have to be everything to everybody, right?
Yes.
You understand your risk issues and concerns, find those partners who are experts in that space that can help you, and you don't need to cast such a wide net. You can build a solid human trafficking program with a short list of partners as far as collaboration goes, especially if you're a less mature organization or you're still looking to figure out the best ways to navigate the issue. I would say, don't eat the elephant all in one bite, but look at a much slower approach, and that has sometimes been successful for organizations we've spoken to.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that's probably perfect to kind of work with Rich. What do you say to that specific information that he shared?
No, I think Scott, I think he nailed it really. So I think as an institution, you have to know what your products and services are, right? So you identify what your products and services are, and they're different across different financial institutions, right? Sure. And then examine those products, know what human trafficking is, examine your products and look at your products and say, okay, what makes us most susceptible? What are our pain points? What makes us most susceptible to that industry, and where can we be vulnerable? The financial industry today, really, it's an arms race amongst that industry in terms of the ability to move money around the world. Like, technological innovation is incredible. It's awesome, and we've come leaps and bounds, over the past few years, and particularly now with us dealing with this pandemic, it's required people to evaluate even more closely on how they can move money across the world safer. And it's awesome. It's awesome in that it allows for financial inclusion. It allows people to move money around the world, that you get money places that they couldn't have previously gotten it to. You can do it cheaper. And it's great, except when that technology gets in the hands of bad actors and they take advantage of it, then bad things happen, right? And then, it also allows for people who are weaker out there to continue to be victimized in ways that we didn't necessarily think. And it really, the difficulty in all of that on a broader scale is that it really transcends borders now. Like the national borders that, were there previously, they really have gotten knocked down, and it really has become a global, it's really the globalization of the money movement. You can move money all across the world now in 2 minutes, right? And you can have organizations in 4 or 5 different jurisdictions, which present all sorts of types of hurdles for you. So there's just as great as the innovation is, it can make things more difficult for you, and it's really that really illustrates the need to collaborate. But you also have, like to Scott's point, you have issues to when it comes to collaboration. What is your appetite for it? You have you have a responsibility to your company has a responsibility, your corporation or your institution or wherever it might be. You do have that corporate social responsible thing to do, but you also have an obligation to your customers and their privacy. You have an obligation to your shareholders if you're a corporation. So you have to balance all of those things out. And then, let's also not forget, we also have an obligation to the privacy of potential victims out there, right? So it's a balancing act of all of that stuff. And, you just have to, I think you have to evaluate each organization that you're going to work with individually, and it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach for everybody.
Sure. And that comes down to creating a space for trust ahead of time. Just like anything, building that trust when it comes to parenting, having trust with your children so they can come to you when there's a problem. And it's the same in any situation where you can have a trust built, whether it be a task force, online task force where you meet virtually, which everything is now, but in your own communities. And then in your own sector, the specific sector, whether you're in cryptocurrency, money service business, banking, credit cards, whatever it may be, having others you can tap on the shoulder to say, hey, I think we might be having an issue, or what are your best practices? And that's why we wanted to model this where, folks that may not understand some more of the intricacies, but really it comes down to the basis of trusting and having integrity when you do communicate with someone else. And I love that. And you guys are modeling that right now. So I think that's really important.
And to your point, different organizations have different bandwidth, right? So,
for sure.
An organization like Western Union, obviously they're a really big company and they can devote a lot of resources to their FIU. There are some companies out there that just don't have it. They might know the right thing to do and see the problem, but addressing it, executing on it is different. So not only do you have to be able to identify it, but you also have to be able to take the steps and execute on it to fix it. And not everybody can do that. So that kind of gauges what, how often do you want to rely on people outside, and how often, do you think you can handle it in-house?
For sure. And that's where I want to extend to everybody. ATII is that place that you can come to get the resources. If we don't have something specifically on hand to direct you to, we can absolutely help you find those answers, and we won't rest until we do. And that's part of what our goal is as an entity, is to become that place for resources for the community at large, so that you can get the answers quicker, because we all know that the longer it goes between identification of a challenge and possible resolution, victimization is happening every day. We don't even know the amount that could be going on. So expediency is very important. Yeah, and that's where establishing that trust and everything helps too. So kind of let's get into a macro level of the flow of information. You had mentioned 314B, Scott. Rich, could you kind of kick this off with how organizations can share utilizing that particular congressional action, I guess, or act with the Patriot Act, please?
So obviously 314B is one of the great things that happen to financial institutions. It allows them to share information.
Yeah.
You either got to be a financial institution or an association of one to do that. And then there are steps in place that allow that. The downside, in my opinion, of 314B, and Scott could speak more pointedly to this because he lives it every day over there, but 314B is voluntary, right? So it takes two to work on that. And if the other organization doesn't want to pick up the phone or respond to you in a timely manner, it kind of lessens the effectiveness of that. TRAC is in a unique position. We obviously can share higher level intelligence views and trends and typologies with people that we see because we have a holistic view at a large amount of data. But we also we can't go sharing, individual transactions regarding specific institutions and PII with people. But the one thing, we can do, which we do, is we kind of unite with people like ATII and the initiative that you and Aaron and the rest of your team have done such a great job with. I think I got introduced to Aaron about 2-3 months ago. And the one thing I will say that you guys do a tremendous job of is facilitating the connection of people and organizations. I've been introduced in the short time I've been, speaking with you guys to people and organizations I didn't even know existed.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And you look at them, and I know what our data set looks like, and I'll receive an email or a call and they say, hey, Rich, we want you to talk to this person or, meet this person. I think you guys will be, have some stuff in common. And then I'll look at what they do and I'm like, their data set is so much different. I mean, they're ostensibly completely disparate data sets, but when you talk to them, you realize, wow, no, you know what? Yeah, we have this, you guys do that. Together, collectively, you can make some really effective change and make some informed decisions, which is super important because even on our best day, whether it be, myself being former law enforcement and I know how it was and Scott knows it at Western Union, the bad actors and criminals are always 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, even on your best day. So, and now with the evolution of, the technology, they're even more so. And so it's important that we operate on all cylinders because that gap is always going to be getting larger. So, I just think that's why it's really important to have those collaborations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you nailed it with that. And the fact that it is voluntary, that is definitely something to highlight. And part of our network and the people that we really focus on working with, we always bring that up. Like, we understand this is a voluntary process, but we also want to have everybody, operating from the same wheelhouse, so to speak, so that there are just these certain givens. And that's part of finding partnerships that work for you is, how are they operating? What's their risk, but also what's their reputation? And then, really having some of those candid talks like we've all had where it's like, hey, these are no-goes. This is where we draw the line. This is where we're all in. And I love that term, lean in. Let's test the waters. Let's start with this one little thing and then see how that goes. Everybody's good, cool. Okay, let's go a little deeper. And that's how we have built all these bridges rather quickly, because we make it very clear we're here to combat human trafficking, and there is no room for ego and there is no room for competition. And we found that the majority of people that we talk to, because we're all humans. I mean, we love humanity, and we're all connected in a very powerful way as humanity. And it gets kind of hard when we realize there are some bad actors, and to get into their mindset and realize that they'll stop at nothing. So we have to push back just as fiercely, and we can only do that together. So I love that. Scott, how would you kind of add to that 314B conversation?
Yeah, I think you both did, first of all, an excellent job of hitting the high points and reading some of my talking points, but kidding.
Oh, are we good? Okay, I did not get an advanced copy. Yes.
But I think just some of the things that I'll just go a little bit deeper, having some of those firsthand interactions in dealing with it is, you mentioned the first thing I was going to talk about is there are no competitors when you talk about human trafficking, right? So yes, I'm engaging with quote unquote competitors. That's out the window when we're talking about a collective fight against such a crime, right? And so that's the first thing that most people understand, and that's good. And there's space for that in the industry, right? And being a compliance professional, you see that from law enforcement. It's not about the credit. It's not about who gets it done. It's can we collectively move the needle, right? And that's what works. As far as kind of, that tactical application of 314B, again, Rich, you nailed it. Each institution still has to make that determination. One, do they want to participate, and to what degree? Because it's not prescriptive from a privacy perspective or a legal perspective. You have to have your own interpretation of how and what coverage it provides you, and that's perfectly fine. But what I will say is the most productive interactions we have is when there's a phone call or there's a conversation that comes along with, a 314B request. And yes, at times it's not possible to call and discuss every single request for information or fulfillment that you're completing, but a 5-minute conversation, even if it's between, investigative staff that are manning the 314B desk, right? As the Western Union 314B contact, I am seeing everything, but I have a team who's working on the data, drafting the responses, and who's capable to speak to the issue. So, picking up the phone and calling and saying, hey, I'm going to send, or I just sent a 314B. Here are my real concerns. Here's what I'd like to talk about. I have a couple questions, and I would love these data points or this to be answered, but that just does a tremendous value. You get that actionable intelligence, right, from another institution that can really make the difference in what you're seeing. So I think that's the one thing that I always promote. When and where you can do it, or for those particular cases where you have the greatest concern, picking up the phone is kind of a thing of the past, so to speak. And in the last 9 months, we haven't been able to attend events like this in person where you can network and build relationships with folks. So there is a little bit of challenge there, but I don't think it's really a good reason to not be able to be productive in that 314B space. So I think that's the biggest thing. Follow up with the phone call, understand that organization's view. Hey, this is our appetite. This is how we approach it, right? And I think that helps as well. So I would add that above and beyond what you guys had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think that's key. And again, comes back to establishing those trusted relationships, maybe calling upon one of your mentors or somebody that you already work with and asking them if they know that person, and maybe create an introduction. And again, having some of these conversations prior to ever really needing it is really key. And you can be assured that anyone who's associated with ATII is more of that team player kind of person. And as people move from industry to industry or from company to company, it's important for us to leave behind when we leave that position to say, hey, these are the people I work with, or if you ever need anything when it comes to human trafficking, just let me know, because that we don't have time often to really establish trust, and trust does not get established overnight, as we all know, and it can be deleted and depleted very quickly with one false move or misunderstanding, which happens often when you're in a high, an urgency situation. We don't always have time for the pleasantries like, hey, how's wife and kids? What's going on? No, it's like, get in, get the information. We've got someone at stake here. So I think that's right on. I love that. Anything you want to add to that, Rich?
No, I mean, I think you guys are, I think you nailed it. I thought, we addressed it. And I think Scott did a really good job. Like I said, he has, day in and day out, knowledge of how that process works. I just, I think it is really important what you guys just said, just to touch upon some people, some organizations, you have to find out what their viewpoint is on certain things. With a lot of new companies evolving, or not even evolving, just coming onto the scene and starting up.
Yes.
What do they even recognize it? What's their attitude towards it? Do they even have an FIU in place, right? And you'd be surprised. There's people that don't. And I know we, prior to this, we had, we talked about it prior to this recording, but as you guys know, TRAC has recently, gotten into the crypto BTM space, and we work with companies in that arena now, and some are much better than others, doing a job of being able to even identify it. So, and it's important because bad actors operate across multiple different platforms, right? So, we're seeing about a 20% overlap of people that are purchasing Bitcoin through Bitcoin ATMs are also transacting through traditional brick and mortar MSBs. And that doesn't even include banking data, which we don't look at, but, so they know they got to spread it out, and it makes it that much more difficult to detect when they're doing that, when they're going across multiple platforms and multiple institutions, which is why it really, really is important to use that 314B capabilities that they can.
I think that's it. Yeah, and that's the bottom line is there are steps ahead of us, but they also don't have the scruples or the hoops that we all up from on the good side of the ledger have to go through. So it's a disadvantage in some ways because it's much more difficult to act quickly. There's all these things you have to go through. So I definitely respect that. When we're looking at these kind of things, how do you identify a strategic partner? Like, how would you identify this person that would be more a team player? Are there certain indicators like, okay, this is not a company you want to align with, and then other things where it's like, yeah, these guys are rock and roll. They're all in to help. Are there any kind of, just from your experience, either of you, that you've noted?
I can speak from TRAC's perspective. We just try and get the word out there on who we are and what we do. I'll be the first to admit we are not a one size fits all.
Sure.
We're not for everybody, and we're no different than anybody else. We only have a certain amount of bandwidth.
Absolutely.
And there's certain things we can do and we can't do. And if somebody comes to us, I'm always going to welcome their call and talk to them, and we'll see if it's possible, if there's work to be done. But there's often times where, it's probably not going to work for us. That's not to say I won't try and help people out. We're always going to do that. But that it just isn't always the case. And then there's others who, on behalf of law enforcement, because it's not us, we manage data for law enforcement. So law enforcement is really the ones that are seeking out this information from certain companies. And when they go to them, there's some that just don't even respond to them. They won't even respond to them at all. So you quickly find out who the bad actors are and who's, really putting their money where their mouth is. And it's just kind of how we fall into that space.
I hear that. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So Scott, how would you kind of, touch base on that as well, and some of the things that you've noticed in your career and, just the experience?
Yep, certainly has evolved, but just not, and I keep using that word because it's important, because how we managed this issue at Western Union 3 years ago was different than we do it today. But I think that's the case for a lot of institutions. But when you talk about how to identify a partner, the first thing is, I always say you cannot be afraid. You cannot be afraid, and you cannot be afraid to ask for help, right? So if you say, I don't know where to start and who to call, start. If you literally don't know, right? There are open source information online very quickly that can give you insights to organizations such as ATII. But generally speaking, the hope is that through events like this, there are a litany of speakers who have history and background with connections that you should be able to feel comfortable, even in a cold call situation, to reach out to organizations. And when I took this role at Western Union and really set a strategic goal to expand our program in the anti-human trafficking space, I did have to pick up the phone or an email once or twice with individuals and organizations that we had not met. It wasn't the preferential thing to do, but I can tell you every single time I did that, it was greeted with open arms. That because of the issue we're working to address, and this is talking about nonprofits, other financial institutions, law enforcement, where we didn't have pre-existing relationships, right? And everybody's willing to pick up the phone and have a conversation, to your point, to start to get to that level of detail. So, if you don't know, ask for help. That's the number one thing. And to Rich's point, don't be afraid of quote unquote rejection, because not every partnership, they're not the right synergies for a lot of different reasons. So that's okay. Don't be afraid to be told no, and don't be afraid to tell somebody no, it's not going to work. We talk about that, and it's we're hitting the same tones here because this is the reality. This is what at least we found successful that really does work. And so identifying those partners, that's one thing. And then I always say it's important to do your homework, do your proper due diligence on that organization when you start to understand the implications of what that partnership means, right? And whether that's, do you want a public facing partnership, or do you want to keep it private? So their organizations are open to do these things. So you can talk about NDAs and you can talk about keeping this out of the public light. Do you want a public facing collaboration? So these are all parts of, setting a plan, for your strategic outreach program. So you have kind of a compass to guide you. What are you, it goes back to what are your risk, issues, and threats, right? How do you need help to do it? What are your resources and your appetite? Who in the industry, in the space can help you? And how do you want to work with them? So having a little bit of plan and getting help along the way, that accomplishes a lot. And then setting that tolerance, right? Knowing what you need to consume is most important, and knowing when to walk away is important. You don't have to chase every lead down, and sometimes it's not going to work. And I think that's being comfortable doing that. And people want to work with each other to combat this issue. There is no doubt about it. So, that's the reassurance that you have to have. We want to help one another, and we all have strengths and information and resources that can do exactly that. And so, you just cannot be afraid to stick your neck out there and say, hey, I want to get in the fight. Let me in the fight. I need someone to, introduce me to this working group, this task force, this contact, and usually from there off you go. And so it just, it takes a spark, and you're on your way. Fundamentally, at least that's what I've seen over the years.
I love it. And modeling what successfully is working, right? And if you see a partnership that you go, wow, okay, what they're doing together is really powerful. Maybe, touch base with the key actors there and ask them how it's working. What have you learned? What isn't working? What's not possible? Where are the barriers? What's a no-go, and all of those kinds of things. And it's like any relationship you have. And in this case, when we're talking human trafficking, we're talking about humans being exploited by other humans for profit. And I think that's one of those unifying things as an entirety of humanity that the good guys can all say, no, not on our watch, not okay, done. We're over letting the inmates run the asylum. We're taking this back. And the only way to do it is by having these conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. And it's okay, because we grow outside of our comfort zone as people and as organizations. And oftentimes we find, oh, they're not as scary as I thought they would be. Or they're not as bad a guy. And it's great, because we can go in our mind and just create this big, boogeyman, so to speak, but then realize, all right, I'm talking to another human being that's a good man, a good woman who means well. Maybe they're a little rough around the edges, but we can get that finesse going. So I think that's awesome. So when we're looking at strategic partners, obviously, finding some resources is key. Stop reinventing the wheel. I know we all are, we're all these creative people at times, and we want to think that we've got these great ideas that no one else has found. I have found the answer. Chances are no, and it's okay. Shorten the time frame and just start with implementing something that's already workable and working, and then finesse it towards whatever, again, your SWOT analysis is, whatever works for your organization. Tapping into ATII as a resource is a fantastic place to start. And we love getting feedback from people on what's working, what's not working. Throughout this summit, you are going to see so many different aspects of the fight from the financial side that it's our goal at the end to have a really like a broad view of the issue, and then continue the conversation over the next year until we get to Summit 2022, which I swear will be here before we all know it, because time is flying. But I want to just kind of wrap up. We've got some time, but to discuss the collective value of that data intelligence, discuss what that can provide and how those partnerships can leverage that intel. So we've talked about streamlining investigations, eliminating the need for re-traumatizing victims, which is something that I am incredibly attached to, because we have the data, the objective information. When we have that and it lines up and it's thorough and it's robust, investigators don't have to go re-traumatize the victim, or in some cases rely on an unreliable witness, because maybe he or she has been so traumatized that their brain just doesn't make them a reliable witness at the moment. And so if either of you would like to kind of start with that, I'd be thrilled.
Sure.
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I'll start. I can tell you from the TRAC perspective that the data that we have, it is invaluable, right? So where it sits in our database, and the ability of our database to, our tools to analyze it and make it readily available to law enforcement is really what makes it super valuable. Because you have law enforcement across the country. Well, one of the things we tell them, we're like, you issue a subpoena to a particular financial institution and you get data back, and oftentimes a lot of investigators, they'll get the data back, and it'll be sitting in a massive Excel spreadsheet, and they don't even know how to make heads or tails of it, and they may open it one time and they may not even use it, right? So it's really an exercise in futility. I put it in our database is what I tell people, law enforcement, when they subpoena stuff, if we can. And data is, outside of anything else, data is just data. It's nothing
Correct.
else,
Yeah.
But the nice part, the fortunate thing for us is we have, obviously a law enforcement data, it's a huge user base of law enforcement officers around the country, 11,000 or so. And when we can combine that ground truth that they're able to provide us with the data, then that data becomes meaningful intelligence. And then you can make some really smart, informed decisions. You can really affect some change on investigations. And to your point, investigators out there that have worked sex trafficking or human trafficking investigations around the country, they know it's a very difficult case to prosecute because the witnesses really need to be rehabilitated before they're even going to become a viable witness. And do you even want to do that, right? So a lot of them come from abused families, have an abusive background. They come from the foster care system. They have drug issues, mental health issues. Who knows it? A litany of things. And the last thing you want to have to do is to reintroduce them to that situation, bring them into court, and have to relive that. So the message, what TRAC does, what we tell people is, we say, listen, try and form and compile a financial investigation against your trafficker through data. And if you're able to do that without having to rely upon the victim as a witness, oftentimes in states around the country, the money laundering charges are more effective than human trafficking charges. Right. And, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I don't care how that person goes to jail. If they're a trafficker, I don't care if they go to jail on money laundering charges or sex trafficking charges.
You and me both. Yep.
Right. Get them off the street. It's a matter of, and again, like I said before, it's not, I fully acknowledge we're not a one size fits all. It just, sometimes it doesn't work. But you need to think outside the box, and you need to be creative in your approach to it. Listen, I said we grabbed the low hanging fruit at TRAC. There are, once Backpage went down, there are dozens of sites out there right now that advertise commercially. We have access to those sites here at TRAC. And how do those girls advertise, right? They advertise typically, or how are they, and I say girls, we both know it's girls and boys, but most of the time it's girls, right? How are they advertised? They're advertised through typically telephone numbers or email addresses. Well, think about all the telephone numbers we have in our data and email addresses, right? So we just take those numbers and we look at them in our data set and we cross-reference them. And if we see a telephone number in our data set that's being utilized to advertise somebody in an ad, and at the same time we see some financial transactions occurring using where those telephone numbers are tied to, well, then you're able to put a name to a face on an ad. And then you're possibly able to identify networks. And then it's a tremendous starting point, where you're not having to do that age-old practice of answering an ad online, having an undercover officer or detective meet some girl, striking up a deal. They write them a ticket for prostitution, and they go on the way, and it's a never-ending cycle. It's pointless. So we have to work smarter, not harder. Think outside the box. Turn the data that we have into an asset.
Love it. Yes, 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 and yes. I totally agree. Yeah. How about Scott? What would you like to add to that? And then we'll kind of, do some parting wisdom and be on our way.
Yeah. I would just say from a financial intelligence perspective, obviously data is king, right? And so when you talk about all this information in this collaboration, you can, I always like to say information turns to data, right? And data turns into intelligence, right? And so if you're a partner out there or an organization that doesn't have data, you have information, right? Based on what you're seeing, we can turn that into data and turn it into actionable intelligence, right? And so that's the number one thing is someone says, well, I don't have a list of phone numbers. I can't help. I don't have emails. Well, do you have interview notes with survivors that you have that talk about themes and maybe questions that you can ask them about places they went, how frequently they were moved? That's information that we can, use our technology. And so really that adoption of the multi-entity approach is the best path. Even from a data perspective, when you think about data as information, that's the path we've chosen at Western Union because we think it's most effective. How we turn that into kind of action, right, is a very simple approach. You get that data and you get it into intelligence.
Sure.
Let's say, using a very simple example of that Rich gave, we get a phone number and we get a name, and we can look for that phone number in our system, much like TRAC can, obviously.
Sure.
You get, or maybe it's a known bad guy, known trafficker. So you have a target of some sort, and you take that target, you look at his transaction profile, right? You understand the elements that are questionable, and then you simply look to pair that over to the rest of your program, the rest of your consumer base, and look for similar characteristics, right? So, and build what we call a typology footprint of how that known bad actor is acting. So it doesn't take a lot of information to take, a handful of people that you have high confirmation are bad actors, evaluating them in your system, doing that link analysis for like transactions and similarities, and then all of a sudden, boom, you have a footprint, a typology built that you can then run rules on and monitor on. And so a little bit of information turns into data, turns into intelligence. And so we talk about that target to typology flow, where you have a target, it turns into a typology. Conversely, same way. You talk about thematic information, themes, trends that you're seeing. That's a typology. Transactions going to country X for this dollar amount from these type of people. You don't have any names, any subjects, but you take those patterns, you look for those patterns, you identify subjects, and you work it in the reverse, right? And then you identify your target. So you go typology to target. But it starts with info, and so that's why I like to impress upon people. Yes, if you're able to share another financial institution, share data with another, fantastic. That cuts out a step. But if you're an NGO or a think tank, or another organization who's looking to get involved, and you have information that can be translated, turned into data, and that's the biggest thing for us. That's really contributed kind of to the detection and prevention of human trafficking. We rely on that information, and yes, it's helped build our knowledge internally to enhance our controls and our own mechanisms. So now we're able to internally identify these things, and we're not 100% reliant on external sources and partners. But we talk about where to start and how to start to build a program. I don't know how, I get this question all the time. I don't know what human trafficking looks like in my system. Well, go get some information, look at your data, and some answers pretty quickly, and you can turn that into a real thought out transaction monitoring program, prevention kind of aspects that every organization wants, and it doesn't take a lot to really get that moving.
Yeah, seek out the information. We have a partnership with an excellent e-learning platform, Manchester CF. They have very graciously created a partnership with us for helping disperse and distribute the education and keep it current, because as we know, things are often changing. There are some patterns that are very, very commonly practiced by people and by traffickers, but then there are these nuances. But getting a baseline information and education, seeking it out from reliable resources, because now with human trafficking, unfortunately being more popular in the regular conversations, the more popular something becomes, the more opportunity to get improper and inaccurate information. So going to resources that you can rely on and trust, and asking other people where they get their information from. And when all else fails and you can't find it yourself, tap on the shoulder of someone who's already doing it and get that information directly from them. I really I love these conversations, and I hope this won't be the last time that we're all talking together, because, in preparation for this, we really established some trust. We were able to figure out, okay, what are, each of you bringing to this conversation? How can we make this the best for those who are watching and listening? We would love to have any questions from the audience. Because this is pre-recorded, we won't be able to get right back to you, but it will be our goal to culminate some of the more common questions, and then I'll reach out to Scott and Rich again and see if we can get some answers for folks, and we can post those either through our website or do a blog together and get that out to all of the attendees. Anything that you guys would like to part with as far as wisdom, encouragement, anything along those lines?
I would say, just to reiterate what Scott said earlier, which I think is super important. don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to acknowledge you might have shortcomings somewhere within your system as an organization or for law enforcement out there. It can be at times, especially with all the financial products out there and just the way it works, it can be nuanced investigations that people might not always be familiar with. So don't be afraid, recognize your limitations. To Scott's point, there shouldn't be any competitors in this space at all. Because I think it truly takes a village. And we're happy just to be one small part of that. And, we're always, if organizations or law enforcement out there needs assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll see how we can help you out.
Love it. Thank you. Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, first, thank you to you, Sam, and ATII for this opportunity and then this summit. I know, virtual space, these can be challenging, and but I think, appreciate, just being able to collaborate with Rich and talk through some of our experiences and really just the messages, thank everybody out there for what they're already doing and just, being open to listen and attend the summit and invest your time in it. That shows the dedication that's there, and so it just reinforces the fact that there's help for you. And so any questions we can answer and be a support from a Western Union perspective or ATII, please reach out. But thank you, everyone, again.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'll be following up with you. And just to kind of wrap up for everyone, we will have other presentations. We have live summits or live panels at the summit, but we'll also have some of these recordings available over time. So please stay plugged in. Be sure you're on our newsletter so we can keep you posted, and follow us predominantly on LinkedIn. That seems to be where we have some incredible conversations and, bring up some topics, and love to hear from those of you around to see what you're available for. All right, looks like we just lost video on Rich again, but thank you so much, gentlemen. I'll be in touch really soon.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.